Good evening. This is the first meeting of the Audit Committee. Just like to point out two missing items on the agenda, election of chair and election of vice chair, but we will be starting with those items. Do I have any nominations for chair? Councillor Eaton?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
Do you have a seconder? Okay. Can we, do we have any other nominations? Sorry. Could we have a vote on that, please? Everyone in favour? Okay, Councillor Burgess.
Thank you very much. So the next item will be the election of the vice chair. So do we have any nominations for vice chair? Rob.
I nominate Stephen Newton.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder? Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? No. Okay, so all those in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you for electing me as chair again this year. Welcome everyone to the committee this evening, especially our new members on the committee. Just to give a very brief introduction, mainly on behalf of for the new members. Just a reminder that, you know, we pride ourselves on very much being a non-political committee. So we do work collaboratively, you know, in the best interest of the council. We maintain that non-political focus throughout. We do have, just to point out, we have two non-voting independent members on our committee. So one is Mike and also Sandeep, who can't be with us, unfortunately, this evening. Really valuable resource to have on our committee. And just lastly to say, it's really important for an audit committee to have a good range of skills and experience and to pick up any gaps in our knowledge. So to that end, Paul Olsen-Ellis has kindly put together a short survey for us each to fill in, just to show where our skills lie and particularly where any gaps are that we might be able to then fill with training. So watch out for that as it comes through. Just before we move on, Andrew, would you be able to just introduce any officers that we have and any guests, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I start with the people online, first of all. So we've got from EY, our external auditors, Janet Dawson, the partner, and Hannah Lill. From KPMG, our new external auditors, we have Edward Mills. From Wokingham, an officer, Mark Thompson, who's our head of corporate finance. And then in the room to my left, there's Catherine Hickson, who's the head of internal audit investigations, Paul Olsen-Ellis, governance and risk manager, Madeline Shopland from Democratic Services, and Susan Parsonage, the chief executive.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, so do we have any apologies this evening?
Sandeep Vig.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the minutes of the last meeting then, I just had a couple of corrections which have been pointed out kindly by a member of the public who's joining us this evening, just to briefly point those out. So on page 6, the penultimate bullet point on page 6, it says the chair queried whether the disclaimed opinion would refer to areas which had not been completed. Could we add the word only in there? So it would, whether the disclaimed opinion would only refer to areas which had not been completed. I think that would be a clearer description there. And then secondly, the first bullet point on page 7, there's a reference to the Assistant Director of Governance, which should be the Assistant Director of Finance. So if we could make those quick corrections. Does anyone else have any comments or queries on the minutes before we approve those? Okay. Can I see a show of hands in favour of approving those minutes as corrected? Yep. Anyone against? No? Okay, thank you very much. Just to pick up on the actions in there. So that's on, I think, pages 13 onwards in the pack. So a lot of those actions have now been completed. So I suggest that perhaps Madeline and myself just go through those after the meeting and mark off the ones that are completed. Then what we'll try and do is for the next meeting, we'll keep the ones that are completed in just for one more meeting, so that if any member does feel that actually, no, they're not satisfactorily completed, they can then raise that. Just to pick up a few things before I open that bit out. The action about contacting the PSAA and subsequently the FRC also were contacted, and members have been updated about that via email. On the risk section in the actions, there was a couple there. One, it was suggested that an appendix was added to the risk reg to show where risks had been removed. So I think that one's still to be done. And then also, it has been. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my mistake. So that one has been completed. Okay, that's my mistake. Thank you. And then there was another one with a reference, requesting a reference was made to the Social Care Futures Vision, which I don't think has been done either. So if we could just check that one as well. There was a query from Mike last time about the quarterly hard close, and we actually met outside the meeting with finance to cover that one off. I think most of the others we can probably address during the relevant section of the meeting, but are there any others that anyone else wants to pick up in terms of the actions at this point? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I did ask at the last meeting whether we could look at the issue, this is on page 15, about adult social care, and I just wondered if there was any thoughts as to whether that would be included in a future audit at all or other investigation.
Okay, I don't know, Paul, you've got an answer on that one at all? Was that was the risk register point?
It was to do, yes, I mean, the question I raised was around customer satisfaction and value for money when it came to us doing adaptations for adult social care.
Sorry, which page is that? Page 15?
It relates to page 15, I think. The question may not be fully shown in the minutes, in the actions there, but that was the question, was about adult social care.
Okay, yeah. Well, if there's no update on that right now, perhaps, sorry, are you signalling? Oh, sorry, Catherine.
Sorry, yes, that was something we were going to take into consideration when we prepare the next audit plan. So that will be addressed then. Okay.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, thank you, thanks. Anything else on the actions from anyone? Yep, Stephen?
Sorry, Chair. I know we have received a written update in terms of the external audit. That was a few weeks ago. I just wondered if there's any further news since we've got the change of government, and obviously the original plan was linked to legislation that would have been passed. So I'm just wondering, it may not be that nothing's known, but I just wonder if it should be recorded an update on that.
Okay, we do actually have a public question on this very point this evening. So if you're happy to wait till that point, and then we can go through it then. Okay, anything else on the actions? Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to public and member questions, we do have at least one public question. Philip Meadowcroft, would you like to ask your question, please? I'm so sorry. Yes, I do apologise. Yes, any declarations of interest? Thank you, Stephen. Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I just need to declare a personal interest in item 8, corporate risk register. My wife and I continue to be working in foster carers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Very pleased, Chairman, that my question doesn't require a 3-minute stopwatch for once. Given that 6 months have elapsed since the last meeting, February, can you tell me, please, so I go ahead. Given that 6 months have elapsed since the last meeting, can you tell me, please, if Ernst & Young have now issued disclaimer reports for either of the both the 21-22 and the 22-23 audits, as back in February at that meeting it appeared all too evident that the disclaimer reports were imminent?
Thank you very much for your question. I've got a short answer to this and a long answer. So the short answer is no. The longer answer, so at the last audit committee meeting, it was explained that a proposed approach and timelines to address the backlog in the audit and the closure of local authority accounts was being consulted on. Just to give the background again for anyone who doesn't have it, those proposals included a backstop date by which auditors would have to provide a modified or disclaimed audit opinion if the accounts hadn't been fully audited. There was also at the same time a technical consultation on the proposed changes to the code of practice to support those changes. The outcomes of those consultations have not yet been published, and due to the dissolution of Parliament in May and the election, these proposals have not yet been considered by the new government. So the latest position was set out by the National Audit Office on 24th of June in their supplementary guidance note, and I would just like to read that so you've got the full kind of picture. So I'm just going to read that note. Auditors will be aware that on 22nd of May, the Prime Minister called a general election for 4th of July. As a result, Parliament was dissolved on 30th of May. This means that the proposals consulted on by the NAO and the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, respectively, for changes to the Code of Audit Practice and the introduction of statutory publication deadlines for audited accounts, the backstop dates, cannot proceed until a new Parliament is formed and the new government has had the opportunity to consider whether it wishes to proceed with the proposals. Until then, auditors should continue to follow the current Code of Audit Practice. Where auditors are planning to complete audits, they should continue to make every effort to do so and as soon as possible. As information on the new government's policy for local audit in England becomes available, the Comptroller and Auditor General will keep the need for further guidance under review. He will also consider the timetable for a new Code of Audit Practice, which will have to be in place by March 2025 as the current code reaches its end of its 5-year life. Until the new government has a policy position on the future of local audit in England, it is not possible to provide any further clarity to auditors on the next steps above and beyond what is set out in this note. In the meantime, as presented at our Audit Committee tonight, EY, our outgoing auditors, have completed and are presenting their value for money initial assessment for the period through to 22-23. There is no further work on those years' accounts planned until any of the changes I've described are confirmed and implemented. As part of the answer to this, I've also asked EY for their latest comments, which I'll also read. In the light of the guidance from the NAO, we, as with other local audit firms, have continued with our work as planned and are awaiting further updates from the Department, the Financial Reporting Council and the NAO. And just finally to say, we continue to work with our new external auditors, KPMG, on the 2023-24 accounts. They are obviously presenting their plan and approach for that work this evening. And we, continue to meet with both organisations. And as soon as we have any further clarity, we will provide an update. So sorry that was very long, but I wanted to make sure you had the whole context for the question. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, even trying to absorb all that, which is very detailed. I think that the last meeting was 6 months ago, and the announcement of the election, I think, was May 22. Were there any subsequent discussions, negotiations, events, if you like, between Ernst & Young and Wokingham to resolve the issues that were bugging them or the committee was aware of in February to try to get this? Because I see from a later item in the agenda, the the KPMG introduction document on the front page. It reminds us that the last audit is still not settled, and it refers to it in the singular. And that was why I meant on both in my question. KPMG are only referring to last year's, with the inference perhaps that the previous one has been settled, and that's what I'm trying to ascertain. Perhaps that is not the position. But the fact that the 22-23 is not settled rather messes up, for a better phrase, the start of KPMG's period. And the sooner this is resolved, the better. And
can I start? Are you moving on to a question? Sorry,
my question is, what discussions took place since the last meeting to get to a result of this, and and is disclaimed audit still a spectre on the horizon?
So my understanding is that it is still very much a spectre on the horizon. If you mean in terms of it's still going to take place, we just don't know what the timescales are going to be. In terms of what's happened since the last meeting, the Audit Committee actually asked for a few actions on this. So one was for us to contact the PSAA, as I referred to earlier, which we did, and they've done what they can in terms of trying to push things forward. So I think as a committee we've done what we can. I would also, reiterate, this is very much a sector issue. We're very much not alone in this. I think something like 2/3 of councils have not had their 21-22 audit opinion yet. So it's not a reflection on the efforts of the council to get this resolved. Obviously, it's not in our interests not to have, signed off opinions. So, we've been doing, and the council have been doing what it can to try and resolve it. But it's a very, difficult situation. And I'm sure we will come on to talk about it a little bit further in the rest of the meeting, but I hope that gives some context as to what we tried to do. So thank you very much for your question.
Thank you. Disclaimed audit is a very, very serious matter, and that's why I'm concerned to see it finished.
We are aware of that as the Audit Committee, but thank you for your contribution. Could I ask that we keep questions in relation to this to the relevant point in the agenda? Is that okay?
Questions, or an explanation on actions.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. You asked about what we've been doing. One of the things that we're reliant upon is the signed off accounts of the Berkshire Pension Fund, and that's managed by the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. It so happens that I represent working on that body. So at the meeting that we have had since the local elections, so it is within the time frame you're looking at, I again did ask about this because this is one of the components that we're waiting for. And at this point in time, there is still no further progress. We are assured that there are no issues with the pension fund. The issues sit with the wider Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead accounts. And they are not being signed off. They were looking for a dispensation. They were pursuing the route for September, at which time we were hoping the pension fund would be signed off. But this is one of the key factors that we need in order to sign off Wokingham, unfortunately, and it's completely outside of our control. But every meeting that I've been at for the last year and a bit of the Berkshire Pension Fund, I have been raising this issue because, as has been said by the chair quite rightly, we are all very keen to get this resolved and closed out as quickly as possible. But thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, thank you again for your question this evening. We'll move on to the next item, unless there are no member, I'm assuming there are no member questions, Madeline, no? Which is the EY's value for money interim report. So this is the interim report on the value for money element of the audit work, and the final view will form part of the audit report when that's issued. I think we've got a useful summary here for us actually as a committee of the different areas that have been considered and how the council sort of manages those arrangements. But I'll pass over to Janet and Hannah to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you said, this report summarises the work that we've done on the value for money arrangements element of our responsibilities for both 2021-22 and 22-23. And you'll see on page 21 of your pack, I think it's page 5 of ours, that the report sets out the areas that we've assessed for those 2 years in terms of any identified risks of significant weakness in the 3 areas that we're required to report. An explanation of how those what audit work we've done to assess those the areas of the reporting criteria, and then a summary of arrangements over the period is also included in Appendix A. And each of those criteria break down into various sub-criteria, and we've assessed and commented on your arrangements in place across each of those in that appendix. So you'll be pleased to see that across both years, we did not identify any risks of significant weakness in the arrangements that were in place across financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. That's set out in summary on your page 23. Now, that is to say, we do not look at have you achieved value for money. That is beyond the responsibilities of the external auditor. So we look at the arrangements that you have in place in terms of the governance structures, the decision-making approaches, who is involved in key decisions, what analysis you do about risks, and how you approach risk monitoring and risks and mitigations. Again, we don't look at are you financially sustainable? We look at how do you manage the risk of financial sustainability? What are the arrangements in terms of your budgeting processes, your financial monitoring, and are decisions made at key points on key matters that could undermine your financial sustainability? So I just wanted to make sure that that was really clear in terms of the approach that we are required to follow by the NAO. And you'll see through the report from pages 26 to 31, each of those main areas, we've summarised the key arrangements that we see in place and then arrived at a conclusion, which, as I said already, we did not identify any risks of significant weakness, nor did we identify any actual significant weaknesses in those arrangements through the work that we've carried out. And so I think the Audit Committee can take assurance from that through those 2 periods, we were satisfied with how the organisation was addressing those 3 criteria. Now, this is termed an interim report, and it looks at those arrangements up to the 31st of March 2023. It is interim because we have an open reporting responsibility that should anything arise that could undermine our view about those arrangements up to the point that we provide our final opinion on 22-23, we may need to revisit these conclusions if something were to come up that could, as I say, undermine our view of the arrangements that you had in place at that time. And typically that might be something such as, a major issue coming to light across the organisation, or an inspection that takes place currently that identifies a significant weakness that must have been in place, but that we hadn't identified through our own work. So it's interim purely for that period. Then clearly we're now into the realms of KPMG's responsibility, and they will be looking at what's going on currently within the organisation and determining how robust your value for money arrangements are currently for 23-24 and for the current time. So we would expect to finalise this when we have that clear understanding of the legislation as to how delayed audits are to be dealt with. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Janet. Any questions or comments from members on this report? Mike, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Janet. I think generally it was a very positive report. I think I had a couple of very minor things. Perhaps you could get back to me. The first one of the points you raised was the reporting lines, responsibilities of 2 or 3 roles. One of them was the head of internal audit, and I wondered perhaps you could give us a bit of insight where it could be different, or what are your suggestions? That's the first one. The second point is on page 30. Sorry, that previous point was on page 29. Next one's on page 30. You mentioned there's still work to be done on strengthening the finance department. So again, perhaps a bit of your insight on what we need to do. That would be very useful. And then finally on page 25, you mentioned this issue we have with valuations of properties. Maybe there's a difference of opinion on how that should be done. So perhaps you could fill us in on that as well, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Janet?
I'm interested that Mike said perhaps I could get back to him on that. So I'm just wondering whether it would be sensible for us just to take those questions away and then put something together that would be more useful than a brief commentary off the top of my head on the spot, as it were. If you're comfortable with that, Mike, that's what I would.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I understand it might be confidential as well. So
yeah, lovely.
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah,
thank
if you could, that'd be good.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mike. Some good questions there. Any other questions?
Can she answer the other 2?
Oh, sorry.
Points, please. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
I thought you meant for all 3. Okay.
Sorry, so did I.
Or is it? You'll get back on all 3 points, will you, Janet?
Yes, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from members? No? Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to your comments on those items from Mike, but we will move on. Okay, so the next item is the audit plan for 2023-2024. So I'll pass over to KPMG to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly first introduce myself as I'm appearing for the first time at the committee. I'm the audit manager for the Wokingham audit from KPMG, and will be becoming a familiar face at the committee for better or worse going forwards. I'm here to present our draft audit plan today as we take over from EY as your current auditors. Obviously, you've had our report in advance, so I'm going to take it to a level as read. But given that we are taking it from EY and things are shown in a slightly different way to maybe the reports you've seen before, I will run over the key parts of the document for you today. So I was going to start on our page 3, which is our materiality. You can see that the materiality for group that we've provisionally set is 12.3 million, but we audit to a lower level than that of 9.2 million, and we'll be reporting everything that's above £615,000 as misstatements to the committee. Our page 5, which is our significant risks, outlines the areas that we pay more attention to throughout the audit. You'll notice that a lot of these are likely to be similar to what you've seen in the past from your previous auditors, and focus a lot on the estimation that goes on within management judgments as they prepare the accounts. This includes valuation of land and buildings, investment property, the auditing requirement of management override of controls, the pensions, which is number 4. I think we use slightly different wording for that, but it comes back to pensions, and the fraud risk around expenditure recognition. We also have an other audit risk around non-capital expenditure being inappropriately recognised as capital. This is largely because you have a large capital programme, and the chance of there being an error within that is slightly higher as a result. I've also noted here about value for money. We will be obviously completing our value for money risk assessment in due course. We didn't bring a risk assessment today as your previous auditors have done so, but we're in that process at the moment, and we'll be bringing a VFM risk assessment to the next committee. I'd also like to bring your attention to our page 24, which is our independence, which I'm required to bring to your attention to show that we are fully independent as your auditors. I don't really have anything else to bring to your attention, but I assume there will be some questions, and happy to take them.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. Members, questions or comments? Yes, Norman.
Hey, hi. On your page 3, right at the beginning, you sort of talk about materiality. The top 9 million seems fairly high to me for this sort of council. I just wonder what the rationale for that is, and how many projects, I suppose, programmes, areas of the council could see that amount of materiality in a change. I just find it a bit surprising it's so high.
So materiality is set on a percentage of the assumed metric that we feel is the most important to the council, and we've set that on expenditure. I think the methodology for setting materiality is broadly the same across all audit firms, and it's the percentage is 2.5% for our materiality. Our performance materiality, which is the lower percentage that we audit to, in order to make sure that we pick up any errors that would come up to the overall materiality, is set at a percentage of that figure. But it's a common methodology across KPMG and all audit firms, as far as I'm aware. We do obviously pick up any errors above that 615k threshold. So although we wouldn't ask the council to adjust for those errors of a lower value, we would still bring those to your attention, and they'd be in our report, so you'd see everything above that threshold.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Edward. Nice to meet you. If I can focus on the same area that my colleague Norman was focusing in on, I just felt that as we're starting this relationship afresh, and for somebody like myself who's a little bit maybe less familiar, shall we say, with some of this terminology, if you don't mind, would you be able to just walk me through a bit more detail about what materiality in terms of the 12.3 means, what the materiality for the 9.2 means, and also what the 615,000 means? Because in my simplistic thing, I was thinking about, well, probably many payments made are below that. So therefore, it may not be payments that you're considering. So I'm just trying to get a bit more detail so I can understand what you're trying to tell me, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 12.3 million is the level to which we would ask the council to amend their accounts, or we would have to issue a qualified opinion. So anything above that would be something that would need to be adjusted for. The 9.2 is the level to which we ask the council to make those adjustments anyway, because in aggregate, in total, if there were more than that sort of error, then you would end up getting over the materiality of 12.3. Anything below 615,000 is something that we wouldn't report to you as an error necessarily. And anything between 615,000 to 9.2, we would report to the committee, but we wouldn't ask the council that they compulsory have to adjust for it to receive a clean opinion. We wouldn't qualify the accounts for an error in that area.
Thank you. That was indeed very helpful. Again, just for my understanding, please. I mean, forgive me if you think I should know this already, because I've been on here a year, but I'm still learning. So the 12.3 million we're saying represents 2.5% of the expenditure. From my reading of other documents, we have about a £9 million reserve. So would it be possible then for us to be £3 million overspent on our reserve, and you wouldn't be calling this out because it's within the 12.3 million? So therefore we could have blown through the reserves and then some, and we wouldn't know? Is that what we're saying, or have I completely misunderstood here?
So from an financial statements audit perspective, we're obviously looking for errors. So it could be the case that the council overspends, but they haven't made any material misstatements in the financial statements that are being produced. However, we do look obviously at the value for money side of things as well. You've obviously heard the previous auditor's risk assessment earlier today. This would obviously crop up in there within the financial sustainability piece, looking at value for money, economy, efficiency and effectiveness, and the council's arrangements within that as to whether they had the correct arrangements in place.
Presumably that would also be a going concern consideration as well, I imagine.
It would indeed.
Yeah,
Yes.
So it'd be picked up basically. I did see Mark's hand go up briefly. Did you want to come in, Mark, or?
Yeah, it was just to add that from a council point of view, if there are errors or differences below the £600,000 and we as a council agree to those adjustments with KPMG, we will put those through our accounts. So although they won't be reported in KPMG's audit report, I just want to give some reassurance the council would correct those, because it's important for us to get the right balances and allows us for our financial plan, and then when we roll the balances forward for the future year, so that we do ensure that does happen, just to try and give some more reassurance. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. Stephen, did you want to come back on that? Was that okay?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll learn more as we go and hopefully understand better, but this is obviously a significant thing and I want to make sure I do understand it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah, Mike.
Not connected to the questions I was going to ask, but I think it's a very interesting point of Stephen's actually. And I think generally auditors' materiality really depends on the number they're looking at, and something like that where you think you'd go from a gain to a loss, I think you'd certainly look very seriously at altering it or disclaiming or having an adverse audit opinion if you're in that situation. But a very, very good point. I had 3 points as well, because I like to treat the big firms the same. So my first point was on page 45, and you talk about file reviews. I just wanted to check that EY were giving you access to their files, and if they have, whether you've reviewed them so far, or whether that's still in your calendar to review. So that was the first point. The second point, on your audit risk and the scatter diagram, which is on page 47, I wondered whether the fact that there's likely to be a disclaimer in the audit opinion on the opening balances is actually a reporting risk. So I wondered whether that should be as a risk. And actually, I have seen somewhere else in council documents, although it won't apply to this year, I think in 24-25, the leasing standard IFRS 16 is coming in. I was going to bring it up in any other business with management, we can cover it here. It's what work is currently being performed, because you'll need to adjust the comparative numbers, and whether you'll be looking at that as part of your 23-24 audit. So that's the second point. And then on the actual, some of the detailed risks, for example, 48, the issue we've had with EY agreeing the valuation basis against fixed assets, as I mentioned before, what discussions have you had with management? Do you agree their approach, just so that we don't have an issue way after the year end where the firm and our management don't agree? Thank you. Those are the 3 points.
Thank you. Can I just add to the risk about the disclaimed opinion? Could you just give us some colour as to what that risk looks like as well in terms of managing the expectations of the committee? You know, we know there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what happens, but you know, how does that affect the likelihood of us meeting the timetable that you've laid out in this pack? So you've got quite a lot to get through. Thank you.
Yeah, I've written them all down, so I'll try and take them in that order. In terms of engagement with EY, we've met with them outside of this committee and talked through our general interview that we have with them. We have not yet done any file review, but it's within the time frame before we start our audit to look at that and consider their files, and we'll be doing so. And we obviously have no problem with EY in order to do that, and they're expecting that from the typical procedures for taking over from the previous auditor. In terms of the, I'll save the best till last. In terms of the fixed assets, we are in constant discussion with management. We are still at the risk assessment stage. We've had communications around valuation. We have a valuation specialist team who we have engaged and had initial conversations with, and they will be talking with management as well and their valuers. So as it currently stands, at the stage we're at, there's nothing that outlines that we're going to have any significant difficulty in auditing these areas. But we do have a valuation specialist team that's going to assist us with that. In terms of the disclaimer, it's difficult to talk about it in too much concrete detail, because in the public domain there's not much concrete detail, but even in the private domain the signs are there, but we're not being given anything firm also. What I would say is that we're anticipating that this won't make the government until probably Parliament until September, October at the earliest. So that's the sort of time frame that we're expecting to have something firm in government. However, the proposals as they currently stand, we don't expect that the backstop will change significantly, and we expect that the previous signs will continue, that there will be a high chance of disclaimed opinions in the previous year. What we are expecting is that we're going to receive additional guidance from the NAO about how we proceed in auditing with a disclaimed opinion, and we're expecting that there'll be some alterations to the current guidance and we're still progressing as it stands to complete the in-year audit work towards the end of this year, which we've agreed with management and have concrete firm timetable for that. Once we reach the final audit timetable, then there'll be the outcome of the proposals, and we will have some firm guidance on what we are supposed to do, if you like, across the opening balances as far as the NEO is concerned.
Yeah, I think probably because of the uncertainties you've described in the last 2 or 3 minutes, I would see that as being a risk, just because the uncertainty, you don't know, as you say. So I think, yeah, that would be my view anyway. But I'm not currently an auditor.
If I may briefly come back on that,
Sure.
I would also like to note that this is the draft audit plan, and one of the reasons for it being draft is that we do have this uncertainty. So when we do bring the final plan, which we hope to do at the next committee, providing certainty is there, then hopefully some of these ambiguities that we're obviously all having to live with, and it's not easy for us either, trying to plan audits with ambiguity built in, but we're expecting these to be more certain, and we're expecting to be able to enlighten you further as a committee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else from members? Yes, Norman.
Thank you. On page 46, just on the KPMG Pension Centre of Excellence, you know, you're going to obviously interact with the local government pension scheme and look at the account balances and so on. But you're also saying that a KPMG actuary will review and assess the underlying assumptions within the entity's end year report. So I just wonder what that would look like, and what if you disagree with the auditors from the pension scheme? What happens in that circumstance?
So I think the process is broadly the same across all audit firms, in that they engage internal actuaries to effectively do a sense check of what has been completed. In general, there's a tolerance and a threshold that they put in place that decides whether or not we need to bring this to your attention as a committee. We don't get directly involved in the pensions audit as the financial statements auditors, beyond receiving the information from our Pension Centre of Excellence and the actuaries that they work with. I've not seen many situations where there's a significant deviation, and our actuaries talk to the big pension actuaries as it stands throughout the year. So we already have a rough idea of where everyone's landing with this. I would also say that we audit, I think, 4 of the councils that are within the pension fund. So there will be a lot of similarity between what happens here and other councils in the local area.
Is that okay? All right, thank you. Mike?
While we're talking about pensions, one area I never really got clear answers from EY was on the audit approach on the year-end pension numbers. In my experience, commercial experience, large groups where you have defined benefit schemes, you have very tight deadlines, the actuaries will give you your financial statements reports, and those are the ones used to be reviewed by your expert departments, as you referred. And in my 2 years here, what it appears to be, we always seem to be waiting for the actual audited pension fund accounts itself, which we all know can take a considerable period after a year end. And I wondered whether your approach would rather mirror what we do in the commercial world with very market sensitive information, tight deadlines, or will you follow the practice of EY?
So what I will say is this does come up, as you'd expect, in quite a lot of audit committees in local government at the moment, and particularly in the local area. It's something that we are being asked. As a result of that, internally, this is being considered. We don't have an outcome to that at the moment, but it is definitely high up the agenda of how can we get around having to wait for the pensions audit effectively.
Would you be able to give us an update at the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Edward, welcome to sort of WBC, and great to have you as part of the audit team. Just my question was more just, you know, from your previous experience and your firm's experience in auditing other firms, other authorities like ours. What would you say if using a sort of a traffic light system? What would you say would be the sort of areas of watch outs or areas of risk or concern generally that one would have when you know, scrutinising or auditing a local authority, you know, the ambers or the reds, if you will?
I think we've largely outlined that on our significant risks page. To be honest, we're not departing particularly from what you'd expect the default risks to be at a council. It's the areas that have the highest degree of estimation that are the areas that have the most degree of risk to them. So when you're talking about judgments and valuation that's based on a judgment, those are the areas where you see the most audit risk.
Thank you, Edward.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about the value money approach, and I noticed with interest what EY said, that they audit the governance around it and not whether you're actually achieving value for money. And I just wondered whether your approach is actually the same, because it does talk in the third box on your page 18 about improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. So do you go beyond just checking the process, and do you actually include things of an element of benchmarking at all, where you've got access to other councils which might be doing similar things? You might better advise as to whether not only is the process delivered, but actually how we compare, and therefore whether there might be opportunities, or whether we're already leading in terms of being so good that everyone else is trying to catch up with us. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
So the broad standards that we audit to are identical. We're following the same standards. We are able to identify areas of good practice as well as areas for improvement. And we would definitely be looking to do that when we get to our issuing our value for money conclusion at the end of the year.
Thank you. Okay, any last comments or questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for that, Ed. We will move on to the next item, which is the corporate risk register. And I'm very pleased to have Susan Parsonage with us. Assuming you'll be introducing this item.
I will.
Yes. Oh yeah, please do.
Evening everyone, and you have got a copy of the risk register in front of you. I just want to draw out some key points from the register and some changes as well since you've seen this document. So, as it says in the report, there are 4 risks that have reduced. So that's corporate governance, education provision, the general election, of course, because that's already been held, and the place and growth procurement. I think what I wanted to mention to you, so those are risks that have reduced or just been removed completely, and then there's the risk that we've got here about the cyber risk. Now there's a commentary about that in terms of changes to the cyber risk, in terms of removing the details of the controls and mitigating actions. So that has been done. However, of course, I think this is something that we need to keep obviously very high on our agenda, given the events of Friday and last weekend and the days since, in terms of worldwide IT outages. It wasn't a cyber attack, but still it was absolutely massive impacts for people. So I mean, just for your information, in terms of the council, there wasn't an impact on the council directly, but we do know about there were GP surgeries, for example, that were affected that you have read about in the news. And at the same time, you know, our community is affected in terms of flights, etc., but no direct impact as such on the council. So I just wanted to draw that point out. Another point I wanted to draw out is that we have reduced the risk around mainstream education provision. However, we had an overview and scrutiny committee last week where it was raised about the fact that there'd been a change in the with the Labour Party and policy on the horizon in terms of tax changes for parents whose children were in private schools, and that might change whether they continue to actually have their children in private schools, and that may mean a further demand on sort of secondary and schools, for example. So that's something that we will, you know, take account of in terms of the feedback that we got from overview and scrutiny. So if I just point out some of the other changes to you. So if I go to SEND. So risk number 5. So we've talked previously about SEND and some of the financial challenges around this. And in this, obviously, we have in here the mitigating actions around SEND in terms of opening resource bases and 2 free schools. I spoke to my DCS today, and I think that the area where we've got a potential delay is the two new special free schools, which are due for September 28. So she's discussed with me there's a potential delay in the building of the 2 free schools. Obviously, we're dependent on a number of factors in this, so we'll keep you updated on that. And of course, you know, we're looking to mitigate any impacts there. And the building the resource bases that are being built, they also will help in terms of meeting the need around SEND. So we're taking action to meet the need right now. So that's the resource bases that are going to be open. At the same time, there might be that impact on the time frame of September 28. So because we're reliant on government with regards to this one. So we will just keep you updated on that. So I wanted to flag that. Another one I wanted to flag was with regards to objective 9 around the climate emergency action plan. So just a bit of a flag on this. So on here, it says that the annual progress report of the climate emergency action plan, there's an issue on that in terms of going to council in September 24. So I spoke to the lead officer on that earlier. That should be going to council in September 24. So just to reassure you on that, and it's the 5th progress report. And I think probably I'd like to add that there was an ONS committee meeting last night where the discussion around the 5th climate emergency action plan took place. So there were a lot of questions last night. So I think I just wanted to convey to you that it is being you know, challenged. Questions are being asked about it outside of this meeting as well, and it was very recently last night. The other point was about mainstream education provision, which I've already covered. So I think those are probably the main points that I wanted to draw out, but you can see the key risks that we have and where the budget continues to remain a key risk for us. You know, that challenge has not gone ahead. We continue to face increased demand for our key services around adults and children, and increased complexity and demand, and that is where a significant proportion of our budget is spent around adults and children. So that has a big impact.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, Rob.
Susan, I might have misheard you, but did I hear you say that the 2 new special schools were expected to be open in 28?
2028, yes.
Essentially, I thought they were supposed to be open in 26. Obviously got that wrong.
Do you want?
They opened in 26.
Oh, full, right, okay. So full in, as Paul said, yeah, full. So thank you. Thanks for.
Thank you. Looking at the list on our page 77, I mean, I know we've got the numbering, let's ignore that for a second. We've got 20 active key risks that we are managing according to this list. You've now explained that risk 9 might not be quite so at risk as it was presented in the packs. That's great. But still leaves risks, I believe 15, 19, 21 and 25 that could be wandering off track according to what's in the pack, which is, it's not 25% anymore, it's now 20%, which is a bit better. But I just wondered whether further mitigations might be needed, because if we're saying these are already wandering off track, I'm just wondering, what I'm not trying to do with this is sort of beat staff and officers up, because that's not going to be constructive. But I'm just concerned that if things are going the wrong way already, and we can see that, are there sensible measures that might be brought in to support the officers in whatever way that might be needed? I mean, that's down to you as management and directors, I presume, so that we can bring these things back on track, because there was a reason why there was a target date and why there was a plan. But to be going off plan, I'm not sure we should just be, oh, well, we're off plan, that's fine, because it shouldn't be fine. But I couldn't see anything about what the plan was to bring it back on track. Does that make sense as a question? Or was I too rambling?
No, not at all. So I can come back. Did you want to come back, Paul, as a general point? So if I could, or any of the point. Okay. So let me take then the first one that you raised. So in terms of support for emerging communities, in terms of prevention, that's a key focus for the council. So, for example, the tackling poverty strategy was discussed at overview and scrutiny last week. So that is something that will impact on some of these communities, some of the people in these communities. So that is absolutely front and centre. And as I said, prevention continues to be a really important focus for us, because we know as an authority, the more we can prevent earlier on, upstream, if you like, the less cost you have later on down the line. So that it absolutely is a focus, and something that when I was at overview and scrutiny, the leader spoke about as in particular. So the other, sorry, you did mention another, yeah. The other.
What I was picking up on was just that when you've got the mitigation action and the statement in that bottom table, which is really handy. Thank you for that. So the retention is correct. So that's good for us, not so good in other areas. But where things are going in the amber zone, or if it's going to dates have already passed. So I've not got my microphone on the way. Dates have already passed, or it's saying that there are issues that might suggest that we're not going to achieve it. So that's what I was picking up on, was where these are highlighted, because if it's on track, that's great, thank you, well done. It's just the ones that were not was what I was picking up on.
I think part of this is that when this is produced, it goes through other committees first, right? So if there's something we could say about the risk committee that you have as a management team that would go through this and, you know, sort of scrutinise it as well in terms of picking up areas that are slipping.
Yeah, maybe Paul, did you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, so in terms of the journey of producing the update to the corporate risk register, we have officers in each of the directorates who work with them on their directorate risk registers, and they update the corporate risk register and bring it to the risk management group, and then we review that, and there's a process of challenge, and some of the questions that you asked there, we have those discussions, and then out of that meeting we take that and then we present it to the corporate leadership team, and they have a very similar discussion around that we have here tonight around what can we do to get mitigating actions back on track. Is there anything else we need to do? How can we mitigate and manage some of those?
So to give you another example, so looking at the Procurement Act implementation, some of that would depend on government guidance, but at the same time, obviously, we have a responsibility. So if we'd had a vacancy in one of our key posts, that post has now been filled. So it means that we can ensure that different actions internally are completed. So that's on your on number 25.
I was going to pick up on that one actually, Susan, because from what I know, there's a lot of work that's needed for that new act, and it's in force from sort of the end of October. So, if we are concerned that there are some, haven't got that long to fix those issues, and that's a kind of hard stop in terms of when it comes into force.
So that's right. So it's good that we've got the manager in place, and at the same time, it's coming to CLT next week. So the corporate leadership team, for us to actually see where the progress is. So thinking in terms of like governance and how ensuring that we have that check, we do in terms of the corporate leadership team, we meet every week on a Tuesday, and we meet in the morning and afternoon. So it's pretty much all day. And so we look at risk-based, as well as doing the business of a council, the things that need decisions on. We also talk about risk-based issues. So, and we've got a forward plan of all, as you would expect, of the things that we need to discuss. And that's why we've got the Procurement Act next week, with being discussed with CLT. So it's I hope I'm not sort of trying to reassure you that that's it's keeping our eye on the ball in terms of the issues, and then what we're doing to address them.
Thank you. That is indeed helpful. I think what's driving my questioning, just to explain that a bit, is that I'm very conscious, because of when people email me in response to my questions and phone me, that we've got officers working very, very long hours, and directors as well. I'm aware of that. And obviously the system is under pressure. So I'm not challenging or questioning anyone's commitment or desire to do a good job. I mean, I think that goes without saying, because we can see the evidence of that. What concerns me is that if things are under just too much pressure, with everybody trying to do their best, it is still a boiling point, then just putting more pressure into an exploding situation isn't going to help. And so I'm really grateful for your explanation about the management focus on this, because this is really where, if you've got to have that awareness, because then you can try and intervene, not to sort of cause more pressure, but to actually alleviate pressure and achieve success. Because what you don't want to do is sort of push hard-working people beyond where they can actually perform and just break, because then you've got a worse situation. So I'm pleased to hear what you're saying about that, and hopefully those mechanisms are robust within the council, so that you do get to hear about them and discuss them at CLT, so you can then take appropriate action. Thank you.
I can give another example if that would help, different to what's actually listed on here, but related to budget. So you will have heard about placements and the cost of placements for adults and children's, and some of those placements, the cost of them relates to where they are in the country, so they're not necessarily in Woking Borough because of the needs of the individuals. And so that was something that came through our analysis of the budgets, and so CLT, working with our assistant directors, actually said there was a need for a focus on actually procuring and seeing how, looking at the different ways how we might get more accommodation for the needs of vulnerable people. And so there has been an absolute focus on, so we went into quite a lot of details so that we needed particular people, colleagues, officers in the organisation, to focus on that particular issue, and ensure that through their focus they were also supported, but in the things that weren't going to get done. So we with some of the things we absolutely have to go into this detail, and I'm very aware of it because we're holding a vacancy factor in the organisation, and that does put pressure on individuals. So I'm keen that when I speak to staff, so I have a big chat which is on a regular basis. I didn't say today, but I've said previously, where people are feeling pressure because of vacancies, they need to speak to their managers about it. And it needs to be a common thing, but in terms of discussions in teams. So yeah, there's So that you're right about that. Absolutely, we've got to take out that that laser focus if we want to change things, which we've been able to do through this focus on actually procuring and getting accommodation. That has saved us money on placement costs, but we've had to take people off focusing on other things to do that.
No questions.
But first, don't mind.
I had a general question about risk management. Some of these risks, we don't have much control over that, I mean, externally. So we have the mitigating actions, but do we also look at recovery actions in case the risk does occur, does happen? Are there recovery actions that we can use to reduce the impact of the risks?
So if I can give another example in terms of an emergency. So an emergency that happens. So yeah, there are things, yes, that are beyond our control. It might be due to, say, flooding. We absolutely will have actions about, because we have plans as to what we do when an emergency happens. So each of the departments have the plans in place to do that. So absolutely, it's we do seek to have the mitigation, even though we can't control some of the the causes. But obviously our zero, our action around zero carbon is one way of helping to address the cause. But we haven't got complete control over some of these things.
Then Mike and then Norman.
Thank you, Rachel. More observations than anything else. I thought our number one risk is on the financial side, as we all know. We've talked tonight about the external auditors' value for money audits, and I wondered whether that is an existing control, because they report to us and express their opinion if there are any actions. So that gives us some comfort.
Yes.
Different matter on the finance. On the way in, I noticed Working Today tomorrow are going to publish their lead article on the deficit of the council financial, and I think it's 20 million over 3 years. So I wonder whether you recognise that number and whether plans are in place to close that gap.
So as you would expect, in terms of where we have financial challenges, which is absolutely the case right across the country for all councils, some a greater number than others in terms of the volume. So yeah, we act very early in terms of the planning to meet those gaps. So there's in terms of the savings that if you like, that we have to make, because there's something about saving, but then also stopping demand, or not stopping, reducing demand, creating efficiencies. So right now, for example, just to give you again a very real example, we're looking at all the proposals for savings in 25-26 that will come to council in February. So and that's something that will go through scrutiny to those councillors and that are part of scrutiny as well during sort of October, November, December time. So there is a lead in to this, and for me it's really important to have a longer lead in as possible, because then you're a more able to think about cumulative impact, the unintended consequences of different things, and look right across the board at all of the proposals all at once. So we're in those stages right now. So absolutely, it's on my radar.
Thank you. And I'm sure it will help if the new government can give more than 1 year's view of what's
exactly right. A multi-year settlement will do.
And then you can plan, whether you like it or not, at least you can plan.
Yes.
A couple of really minor points on other risks. On number 4 on housing, I guess we need to bring out the various rules, if you like, it's probably the wrong word, from the government on housing is going to change, so that whether that's good or bad, that is a risk, a fundamental risk. I think it's just a different approach, isn't it? And I think the only, again, really minor on risk 10 on emergency response. On controls, I assume we work with central government and we've got their resource to help us plan against emergencies. And I wonder whether that should be brought in as well, commented.
I think, yeah, that's right. In terms of emergencies, that I guess it's thinking in terms of different levels. So we've got an emergency planning officer in the council that advises our departments, and as I mentioned, each department has a plan in the event of an emergency. At the same time, it's how we work across Berkshire. So I was at an emergency planning meeting on Friday, just gone. It was about the strategic planning for an emergency, because I'd be classified as gold in that. It's just the term. Sorry. Sorry. So it's about actually, and there were members of the teams from Wokingham there and other Berkshire teams there, and it's ensuring that we're providing the right response, and at the same time, if we need mutual aid, because we might need mutual aid, that there was discussions about that. We've got an agreement in place, but it's we were talking about mutual aid on Friday. So it's how we work at a Berkshire level as Wokingham, and then at the same time we're part of local resilience forum, and that's on a Thames Valley basis, so that's on a police footprint. So that's also where the Thames Valley LRF, which it's called, gets the information straight from government. So that's where we get our link into sort of directly into government, if you like, aside from any sort of communications that we might get from government departments about this very thing. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Norman?
They've got 2 or 3 questions, I think, just on different risks and priorities. First one's on 4, uncontrolled development, reduced economic development. And quite a lot of this, I think, from my point of view, seems to hang on the local plan and getting the local plan updated. Is the intention still to bring that to scrutiny to council and executive in September?
The intention as it is stated in here, so there's no change as far as I'm.
It was in the introductory text that it said September, I think it was.
Yes, it does. It says, I'm just
mentioned something about any impact of change of government, so still intending to bring it in September?
That is and Paul, have you had any?
That's the latest.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then number 21, meeting affordable housing needs, page 94. I just wonder what we can ever do that would bring this from amber into yellow or even green. You know, it all seems to me that there's more that can be done. There's more that can be done. Do you think it will ever shift out of amber?
So in terms of affordable housing, yeah, that is a challenge for Wokingham. It's a challenge for all Berkshire authorities, and it's a challenge for the South East in terms of actually providing affordable housing. And if I talk about the Prosperity Board, which is the Prosperity Board which has been set up by the 6 Berkshire local authorities, and it went to council earlier on this year, and it's where the 6 local authorities and the leaders in particular have come together to take a strategic approach for different issues around the economy. And one of those matters that they've got as a priority is around tackling affordable housing. And I think there are different ways. So it's about the proportion of new builds that are built. It's also about how housing associations, for example, operate in our areas. And it's maybe what we build ourselves. The government policy might have an impact on this in terms of right to buy. So I just wanted to convey to you that the affordable housing is a priority for all 6 local authorities. And what it might mean in terms of, say, housing associations, for example, is that we have more leverage with the bigger housing associations. But we're still in the we're in the earlier stages with this in terms of really getting that understanding across Berkshire, and also looking at really good practice in the rest of the country. But yes, it's important. It's a really important one, and I think it will. I think we need to update you on whether that can change. Going back to your direct question on that.
Thank you. Next one was on risk 22, which is support for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. I mean, again, that's high risk. Yes. I mean, it seems to be largely around funding, but it must go beyond just funding, or the other issues as well.
So I think the where, for example, we have a particular sort of needs is where the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children move from being children to care leavers. So it's important that we're on top of that in terms of the support that's actually required. So absolutely, you ask as the acronym is in terms of children who fall under, young people and children that fall under this. As it says, getting the fostering right is important, and there's very recently there's a Southeast fostering hub that's been set up, and that's in particular to try to address the different needs that we have in the Southeast, and there's there are quite a number of children, obviously, that have come, for example, via Kent, that are in that have needed homes and support in boroughs in the southeast. So this is a way of acting together to actually see how we can improve the fostering offer that we have. But absolutely, there are variety of needs, complex needs as well, in terms of the background that these children and young people may have faced in terms of psychological support and all kinds of support.
Yeah, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some really good points have been raised, so thank you to my colleagues on the panel for that. Really good stuff. I just wanted to zero in, if I may, on risk 7, which is about adult social care supply, sustainability and sufficiency. It talks in the introduction bit about provider failures and more packages of care handed back by providers. And going back to my youth many years ago, I lived in Southend-on-Sea, and we had a number of homes that were managed by the council in those days, and they provided a range of facilities. And then it became out of favour for councils to do this stuff, and it became more private. And I know and it talks about Bluebell House coming on stream with Optalis. And I just wondered whether, and it may already be being looked at, whether this actually provides an opportunity for us to go back to more like a historic model, where working with partners, I'm not suggesting that Workingham sort of becomes a specialist sort of place, but working with people like Optalis and maybe others, is there an opportunity to sort of manage and mitigate our own issues and risks through more self-provision, if you like, through partners? And if so, is that being looked at? Because it talks about that under existing controls, but I wasn't sure whether the last bullet in the mitigations on the right-hand side there, which is specialist accommodation project and the delivery of supported living concept, whether that does try and cover what I'm thinking about, or whether that's another aspect to it. I just thought that it sounds like Bluebell House is going to be great, but is there opportunity to do more in other ways to help? And we could actually do something really good and get on the front foot, because the one thing we do know is that we've got an aging population, and we're getting more and more demand that's going to come over the hill. So this is not something that's going to reduce in the near future.
Thank you. So in terms of care for adults. We have sort of older people that may have dementia, for example. At the same time, we have adults who've got disabilities, whether that's like learning disability or physical disability. And so, yeah, the care home absolutely, and it helps in terms of our placement costs. So I was talking about placement costs before, absolutely helps in terms of that. I was watching a video this afternoon that's been made, which is fantastic in the sense that you've got children, you know, they're adults, they're sons of mums and dads that are in Bluebell House, and they're saying how fantastic it is as a place for their parents to actually live. So that's great, because it's about actually reducing costs, but it's about really good outcomes, obviously, as well. At the same time, your point about specialist accommodation project, you know, earlier on in the conversation, I was talking about the fact that CLT got involved in actually thinking, how do we reduce placement costs? Let's look at specialist accommodation. And so we got officers onto that, and that bullet point refers to specialist accommodation, because that means accommodation for, say, people with adults with, say, learning or physical disabilities. And I mean, I've got to point out, because I think I should, for adult services, they won an award for the specialist accommodation. So won an MJ award for what we've done in the borough. So it's, you know, I think we're very alive to the issues and looking at different ways to solve them, but in a way that ensures that those that are affected get, you know, have good outcomes as well. You know, that the housing is good quality. So hopefully that answers.
Yes, thank you. It does. I suspect my concern is about maybe a shift from away from where we try and provide care in people's homes more, where, you know, that's obviously a desire, but with the way things are going and the supplier challenges, it just feels like that's becoming an almost more increasingly difficult one to resolve, where they can stay in their own homes and receive the care, and therefore having care homes where they move to might actually provide them with a really good outcome. So, you know, a social side and the care, where the carer can just move between rooms as opposed to having to travel between homes and losing all of that time. And I know it's sort of going back, and people love to stay in their own properties, but I was thinking maybe there needs to be a step change now, where in order to actually provide that level of care with the carers that are available, the specialisms that they need, where we move to that more model where we have communities rather than trying to look after them in their own home. That was really what I was getting at. I think it's a fine balance, because there is people being in their own. I think in particular, if we may talk about sort of like older people, people being in their own home is really important to them. They want to be in their own home, even if it maybe is their best interest. Sometimes I can think of a particular example myself, and so. But at the same time, because there has to be a choice thing in this. It's very much down to the individual. At the same time, when people are in their own home, it means that that they're more independent, and that's really important. And so it's a bit of a fine balance. So we're trying to find accommodation where we can reduce costs and provide really good accommodation, but at the same time, I think you know we'd still looked to actually want to for people to stay in their home, unless it was assessed that they really need, you know, they really need to be move from their own home into full-time care provision. Because of course we do as you alluded to, we have, you know, carers do go into people's homes as well. So yeah, it's a balance, I would say. But we've bought our own care home, so we are actually buying specialist accommodation. So we are doing that.
Just one last point that might.
Purely a point. There's a halfway house, and I work for the National Association of Almshouses. So It's independent living for people, but in a community. So they have accommodation for life. Generally, it's accommodation around gardens and things like that. We have several in the borough, actually. We have older ones in places like Twyford and Hurst, and we have one opposite the Ship. But we look up to 36,000 people coming out of social housing generally into almshouses across the country, 1,600 charities. So I'll give my sell point for the asking.
Thank you for that, everyone. Some good, as Steve said, some good discussion there. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for your answers. We'll move on to the next. I'll move on to the next item, which is the internal audit investigation report. So I'll pass over to Catherine to introduce this one. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'll just give a brief background to the report and an overview. I know we've got some new members on the Audit Committee, so I hope it will be helpful for you. Each year, as the head of internal audit, I'm required to form an annual opinion on the Council's internal control, risk management and governance framework. And this is in order to comply with the accounts and audit regulations and the public sector internal audit standards. So the purpose of this report is to summarise the work of the Internal Audit and Investigation Service over the 23-24 financial year in order to form that annual audit opinion. And the report is supplemented by previous quarterly reports on audit activity that have been presented to this audit committee. So in terms of points to note, from the work that the Internal Audit and Investigation Service has undertaken through 23-24, we've concluded that the internal control, risk management and governance framework is substantially complete and generally effective, but there are some improvements required. This is from a range of 4 opinions, with the highest one being complete and effective, and the lowest one being there are no effective processes in place. I just also mentioned that in forming our opinion, we also take into account other assurance mechanisms across the council. So, for example, the Ofsted focused visits. There was an independent review of the housing companies during the year, so we've placed reliance on some of that work. And then there's the safety valve work. Those are just some examples, but there are other reviews across the council too that we take into account. In terms of the actual internal audit and investigation work to support that opinion, if I can refer you to Appendix A1, which is at pages 130 to 134. This lists all the audit and investigations undertaken during the period, and also says the status as at the 31st of March. So this is whether the audits were at final stage, draft stage, or work in progress. And where applicable, where audits have been finalised, we've included the audit opinion that's been awarded for the specific audit. There have been some updates since I produced this report, and so I'll just provide members with some more updated information. So 3 audits have been finalised since the report was produced, and they are Safe Recruitment, which was the 21-22 follow-up audit, and that attracted a Category 2 opinion. Capital expenditure was finalised, and again, that had a Category 2 opinion. And then we undertook some work as a critical friend and advisory on the waste collection changes project, and we'll be doing further work on that as that progresses. That wasn't awarded an overall opinion because that was more an advisory piece of work. And then 2 audits have been progressed to draft report stage. Those are debtors and temporary accommodation. And all those will be reported to the next meeting of the Audit Committee in my Q1 progress report. I thought you'd appreciate an update at this meeting. So other aspects of the report to draw to your attention are pages 114 to 117, which lists the high-risk concerns that we've identified from our audits over the course of the year, with the proposed management actions and timescales for implementation of those actions. Within the audit team, we do maintain an action tracker, and that records all the very high, and medium concerns. And we follow up the high-risk concerns on a regular basis, just to confirm to Audit Committee that action's actually been taken within these timescales that have been agreed. And that's just to give you reassurances that concerns are being acted upon. and I share that action tracker with the chair of the Audit Committee on a regular basis. Also within the reports, I've highlighted specific audits that have attracted the lowest categories of audit opinion, that's category 3 and category 4. So during 23-24, there are actually 3 audits that fell into the category 3 opinion. There was the right to buy audit and information governance, and those have been previously reported to the committee. And a new audit in quarter 4 was on Graysley School, where that attracted category 3 opinion. There are summaries of each of those audits within the report. And for each of them, again, management action plans have been agreed with timescales for addressing the concerns that we've identified. And copies of those reports are provided to the chair of the Audit Committee as well. The report also mentions the anti-fraud activities on pages 121 to 124. And I'll just mention as well that we appointed a new corporate fraud investigation officer in November 2023, and they've been further developing that part of the service, reviewing our processes and establishing relationships with service areas. I also mentioned in the report that we undertake work in addition to the Wokingham work for an external client, a unitary authority, and that helps to generate income for the council. And this will continue in 24-25, where we've agreed a programme of work to be undertaken for the year. And then just finally, I'll mention our professional internal audit standards. I know these were mentioned during the audit training that you all received recently. As an internal audit function, we're required to comply with the public sector internal audit standards. And in July 2023, the Internal Audit and Investigation Service had an external review by SITFA, and we were assessed as having the highest category of compliance as a service, and we had the overall opinion of fully conforms. You'll be aware also that there are some new global standards that come into effect, and they will be active from January 2025. So just wanted to mention that we have already started work to start implementing those standards, and we'll be reporting to future audit committees on the progress there. So that's an overview of the key aspects of the report. The recommendation is that members review and scrutinise the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'll open it up to members. Any questions or comments for Catherine? Okay, I'll kick off, and then I'll kick off, and then I'll come to you, Mike. Yeah. It was just a question about the outstanding recommendations. So page 113, it shows that there are no high concerns that are overdue. But yeah, if we look down at page 116 to 7, there are some recommendations on there going back to 2021-22, where the date for completion has been pushed back to up to June 2024, but they're still not completed. So although they don't show as a high risk concern that is sort of outstanding and overdue, they're still potentially sort of 2 years old. So I don't know if there's an update on those 2 that are still outstanding from way back in 21-22, or whether could provide an update on those in due course. It just seems like a long time for those to be outstanding.
Are you referring to, sorry, which one?
So yeah, so on page 116, under the recruitment and safeguarding, where it says progressing target date extended, and then it's extended to the end of June, which I appreciate with the timescales of reports and stuff that's gone, but and then there's another one, if I'm understanding it correctly anyway, on page 117 that is still not completed. And the target. So my concern is that, the target date keeps getting extended and extended. So it doesn't show in the overall numbers as being overdue, but, it's still kind of action that's 2 years old, if that makes sense.
Okay, I can explain on the recruitment and safeguarding. We've recently just completed the follow-up work on that. So we undertook an audit. Pleased to say there has been good progress made, and that will be reported to the next meeting of the Audit Committee in my quarter 1 progress report. Okay. This report just goes to the end of March, so that other piece of work was in progress at that time, so hence it's not found its way into the report yet.
Sure. Okay.
And I think on the one on page 117, that was extended because I think the amount of work. I think the original target date was quite ambitious with the amount of work that had to be undertaken. So we do keep on track of that, and it was extended to June 24. So again, we'll be reporting in the Q1 progress report as to where we are now.
Thank you for that. Mike.
I had exactly the same report. I think it's on page 112. It's illustrated. Sorry, I had exactly the same point. It's illustrated on page 112 in the bar chart here. The fourth column concerns due progressing with target date extended. And I wondered, Catherine, on page 113 that Rachel's referred to be honest, I'm not sure if it's the 14 number or the 4 number, but presumably part of those numbers are the high risk concerns that have been extended. And maybe if you just split that out to say, of that number, this amount relates to deadlines that have been extended, and this is just in the normal course of carrying out the action.
Yeah, we can do that.
Might be one way of getting around that. And then we can monitor that number.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask questions around the Graiseley Primary School. Just for my information more than anything, how did that come about in terms of an audit? Was it sort of a flashing red light as with the finance statements that were coming in? How did we discover there was a problem? And what's the process that we go through?
Right, we were actually asked to undertake the audit by school finance and for the school. So we took that from the contingency element of the audit plan. So that's how we were introduced to the issue. It was largely because of the deficit at the school.
Okay, so do we often look at schools and finances in schools and other things, such things?
We do look at them if we're asked to do so. Because our audit plan is very much linked to the corporate risk register and the schools don't actually feed into that corporate risk register, we don't necessarily have an ongoing programme of work in schools. We just keep in touch with the school finance team. So if we see an issue coming up, then that's something that we can do as an audit. So we've actually done about 3 schools this year on that basis because we've been working closely with school finance on that.
I think you just answered my point right at the end there. I wondered whether part of your internal audit planning, we should pick up the fact that that's come up as quite a high risk, that particular school. So you should work with the education department on identifying other schools.
Yeah,
we should cover, but I think we've gone to 3 already.
Yeah, we do work with them looking at trends as well. So if things are popping up as issues, then it instigates an audit visit as a matter of course.
Okay, anything else? Yeah, Rob?
Again, this is because I'm new to this, it is almost certainly my failure to understand. But going back to something we were talking about on the change in the number of concerns on page 113 on the table you've got there, we had 3 concerns not yet due at Q3, 4 concerns in Q4, but no new audit concerns. Am I misunderstanding this table somehow? How do we get from 3 to 4 without any new ones? I don't understand.
To double check that, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, this is the position at the audit committee on the 7th of Feb and then on the 5th of June.
Well, we seem to have gone straight from Q3 to Q4, so it's only 1 quarter difference. Should be something, I thought.
Yeah, there are 3 new high concerns. If you see the second column there.
Yes, but those, yes, I understand. So, 3 of those rows add up and 1 doesn't, basically. As I say, I might be misunderstanding, but it just looks to me like there were 3 in Q3, the concerns not due. There were 4 in Q4, but no new ones. Am I misunderstanding something?
Yes, I think
it should be a 4.
Yeah.
I think that the bottom one should be a 4 because then you add them up and you get to 18.
So I think we just need to check that final column, don't we, in terms of whether those 3 new ones are incorporated properly, but we'll check that's fair comment.
So, I think then you will do concern won't necessarily be concern. For some reason, it doesn't go on. It's working now. So it could be that new audit concerns don't necessarily fall down in concerns yet due, so it might not cast through. But I think there's a table on 112 that probably would help the reconciliation, Catherine.
I think what we'll do, Catherine, when we have our next one-to-one, we can have a look at that and whether we can present it just to make it crystal clear. Yeah. Should we do that? Are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else from members for Catherine? Okay. Thank you very much. It's really thorough and clear report. So thank you very much for that. Which just leaves us with the forward programme. You can see the items coming up on the agenda. Can we take off the Treasury items that have slipped in again? Because we no longer look at Treasury items as a matter of course. So if we could remove those in some of the future meetings. We're also just thinking about whether a couple of other things to sort of add into the mix. We looked some time ago at there was a really good report on sort of high risk failures in the sector, and we looked at that and sort of tried to think about Wokingham and what we could learn from that. So we're going to think about whether that's an item that we can bring back to have another sort of review of that area. Also, just to say, in terms of meetings, I am looking to set up another meeting with just members and auditors. So hopefully be able to set that up for the September meeting. So we'll probably meet just slightly earlier, and it will just be without officers. We can talk to the auditors just as members. So just so you know that's in train. And does anyone have any other comments on the forward programme or suggestions? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. This may well be being picked up by another committee, so it may not need to be us. I was just picking up on the fact that in Wokingham today, reported on the 18th of July, the issue of 2 school children who had not yet been offered spaces from school spaces from September 2024. And also this came up when I was talking with residents during the recent campaign periods, where they seem to be a long delay waiting for educational healthcare plans, EHCPs. And the Special Educational Needs and Disability Regulation 2014 indicates that there should be a 20-week time limit. There are no repercussions, it seems, for missing that, but there is opportunity to extend through specific circumstances, but they don't always seem to be. It seems that more often than not, it's not due to those circumstances that things are being missed and extended. It just seemed to me that whilst all residents are important, those that we tend to class as more vulnerable or maybe getting into that vulnerable stage should perhaps merit more special attention. And when they are children and the actions or delays to action can have significant, potentially lifelong impacts, I believe that we should as a council be taking specific interest in that. So, and this is being picked up in another committee, which I'm more than happy for them to do. I was wondering if we could ask, subject to my fellow committee members' agreement, if we could invite the Director of Adult and Children's Services, along with any other officers that they feel would be appropriate, to bring a report to us at a future meeting on the situation for the last academic year, with the provision of EHCPs in accordance with the 20-week time limit for applications received relating to that academic year and for any ones that were carried over into that year. If there is a plan to achieve 20-week target, or whether we're just accepting that this just doesn't happen for whatever reason, and I'd like to know what that reason is if that's the case, other than obviously where the exemptions apply, because we would accept that, of course, how the plan is progressing, and when the council and residents can reasonably expect the 20-week target to routinely be achieved, other than the applications where as I say, the exemptions do apply. So is this being picked up anywhere else, or is it something that we might look at? I'm open to officers to advise me.
Yeah, so on the first point, is there another committee that this is better suited to going to? If not, I think it is something we can look at from a kind of, risk and control point of view as to are the right processes in place, etc. So, Susan.
So, in terms of EHCPs, that falls within I may have mentioned this before, safety valve. So, we're part of a government programme which relates to the volume of support that's required for children with special education needs, and it's a whole sort of like process in terms. So one aspect of that is the completion of EHCPs. Now I know there's been improvement in that, and it relates to the cost of the actual provision of care around EHCPs. So we are a council that has a high cost, not because we're doing anything wrong, it's because we've got a high demand. So that's why we're part of the safety valve programme. So I think it absolutely does go to children's services, ONS, and we get scrutinised by government as well, because we have to do a return. We get a lot of scrutiny because we get 20 million to actually assist on this. And say, for example, that I was talking about prevention earlier on, some of the money that we've got the support for is around actually providing prevention to actually maybe in some cases prevent the need for an EHCP in the first place. So how do we provide support at schools at an earlier stage to maybe not need an EHCP? So and the indicator around the 20 weeks indicator, because I think you need to know the facts around it really. And so I think we just need to think about what goes to the children's ONS, and then what could potentially come here to answer the question, because I think at the very least you need to know, as in we need to communicate with you the facts of it, the situation in terms of how many applications we get, what our performance is, how we perform against other councils, for example, around that, what the reasons are that there might be a delay, because it's not always down to the council is not the only partner player in this. So for example, you need educational psychologists, you need the NHS in terms of actually the meeting that deadline in terms of 20 weeks. But I think if we provide the facts, then at least you know the situation is, and we just need to work out whether it's something that comes here or it's an answer to you.
Thank you. I'm certainly not looking to try and create a whole extra piece of work. So if there's existing work going on that we might receive or something, I'd be perfectly satisfied with that. I think in response to what you said, a couple of thoughts come to mind. I understand what you're saying about it being a high cost area. Maybe rightly or maybe wrongly in some people's minds. I think that's a secondary issue in that actually getting an EHCP processed, identified whether it is appropriate to be issued or not, having those early interventions is all good. But I wouldn't be looking for it to be delayed because we're worried about the cost. And that may not be what you were trying to tell me, but that's what they took from it. So maybe I misunderstood on that one.
No, it's fine. I was just giving you context, really.
Yeah,
so
I get that.
Just to say to you, the important thing with an EHCP is actually identifying the appropriate level of provision for a child or young person at a certain point in time, and to actually make that decision. There are different specialities, if you like, that need to feed into that. So it's that's what can actually lead to that to the time to actually make that decision.
So can I suggest that we put that further information and answers is provided, and then we outside the meeting we can decide what the next steps are, whether it's something that should be coming here or whether it can be addressed in children's services. But point noted, and we'll move forward. Anything else on the forward programme that anyone wants to? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll end the meeting there. Thanks everyone for your contributions. Some good discussion this evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.